From the Victory Studios in downtown Little Rock, this is Capitol View with your hosts, Roby Brock and David Goins.
And good Sunday morning to you. Welcome into Capitol View. I'm David Goins alongside Roby Brock. We're going to jump right into our political roundtable this week. Thanks for joining us. We're joined by Republican State Senator David Sanders and Democratic State Representative Reginald Murdock. Gentlemen, thank you all very much for being on Capitol View this morning.
Thanks for having us this morning.
Good to have you. Let's start first with what has been the biggest story of the week. The Democrat Gazette has broken a story, started on Monday, about a parolee named Daryl Dennis. He is involved in a murder, multiple charges, out on parole. Is this an Act 570 problem? Is this some sort of other legislative problem? Or is this a funding problem, Senator Sanders?
Well, neither. It's actually a parole problem, and it goes to the heart of the administration of parole in the state of Arkansas, which is administered by the Department of Community Correction. This is a horrible case, a case where you had an individual who, gosh, he has a criminal history that goes all the way back to when George Herbert Walker Bush was in the White House. He's out in 2000, gets out in 2008, and racks up just an incredible record of felonies. And this is somebody who clearly should have been revoked. His parole should have been revoked. He should have been sent back to prison.
How did he fall through the cracks?
Well, he fell through the cracks because, DCC didn't follow their own policies and procedures. The fact is, he should have not fallen through the cracks. He should have been revoked. He should have been sent back to prison, and he wasn't. And I think that's what we're going to get to the heart of, both as the legislature will take a look at this with our interim committees, but also the administration has now taken a look at.
What's your take, Representative Murdock?
I tend to agree in principle that there was a ball dropped somewhere along the way. It's a DCC situation. You have other people involved, and I think a full-scale investigation is underway. I'm meeting with the governor. He's just opened up to all the lines to checking this out to really see what happened. Certainly on the surface, it seemed like a parole situation, as Senator Sanders mentioned, but I think there's probably some other people involved that need to be held accountable as well, because obviously with that many repeat offenses, something should have happened before now, and certainly we've taken it very seriously, as Senator Sanders has spoken, and we're really, really, really disappointed in what has happened. The state is, and everybody in the administration is, and we need to make sure that this does not happen again.
Clearly, there's going to be a legislative review. Your thoughts on, I guess it was Wednesday, Arkansas State Police saying they're going to do an administrative review of their own. Your thoughts of, the state police basically looking at a state agency?
Well, go ahead.
I think when something happens to this magnitude, with this much obvious negligence or a ball being dropped somewhere, if I can use that term, then that becomes necessary. I think we have to look at every area from top to bottom and just really take a look at this. That's uncommon for that to happen, but I think for this type of situation, I think it's warranted, and I think it makes sense.
What are state police going to learn that you guys wouldn't necessarily learn?
Well, I mean, the fact of the matter is, when something needs to be investigated, obviously the state police is brought in. So there's two issues. One, there's the specific case involving Daryl Dennis in the murder of Forrest Abrams, but there's also sort of the overall structural operation of and function of parole in the state of Arkansas, which some of us have been talking about for a long time. I would point out that we did actually pass 3 good bills this session that strengthen parole, and I think we'll actually go far to begin to eliminate some of these problems. But I might add, in particular with this case in mind, the agency didn't follow its own policies and procedures, and that's a big problem. And again, unfortunately, from those of us who've been following this and working on parole issues, this is not just the exception to the rule. This is, unfortunately, we've seen it repeated over and over again.
Are they not following procedure, though, because they don't have enough manpower? Are they not following procedure because they just choose not to follow the rules, the laws that are established? Is it a funding issue? Does that agency need more money?
No, so I would say this. A lot of it goes to the heart. It depends how far you want to get in the weeds here. It's on how they are measured, metrics. They are measured today on revocations, how many revocations the agency is doing. That is going to change as a result of some of the changes that we made in terms of changing the definition of recidivism. It isn't revocation based, it's action based. Is a parolee arrested? What happens then? Is he, new charges brought against him? Is he reincarcerated, or she? So I think we're going to, it's a structural issue, it's how they're measured. You can bring up the question of funding. I believe it's a philosophical problem. I believe it's a leadership problem. And I think there's probably some people employed today that don't need to be employed.
Representative Murdock.
Well, and certainly I think as we get more into it, we're going to find out if all of those things are true, just as Senator Sanders present them. But there is some correlation probably between caseload, workload, and the some of this happening. Certainly, there's not an excuse. We're not making an excuse. But before we just totally lay total blame on what we're going to do and cast here, we need to make sure that we continue the investigation, do a thorough investigation. And it may come to be true. Obviously, some things have happened, and they need to be taken care of. And I think we're going to discover that more fully.
Well, and you mentioned metrics. I mean, revocation is that figure that DCC talks about, the reduction
recidivism.
Recidivism. Like these are numbers they point to as a positive. Are those not the right numbers to be looking at? What's kind of your feel?
So
there?
the old definition, I guess, until July 1 is recidivism is revocation resulting in confinement in an ADC or DCC facility other than the technical violator program. That's the old definition. So the new definition of recidivism goes to rearrest, reconviction, and reincarceration of a parolee in a 3-year period. So what we've done is taken that metric of revocation off the table. Now we're looking at all aspects of, how are our parolees doing out there? We don't have a clue as to what's going on. The thing that made this case separate, and Spencer Williams at the Democrat Gazette has done a fantastic job, is we saw the internal parole documents, the CRONUS, the OMIS documents that measure and track all the things that happen. And you saw parole officers saying, frontline parole officers saying, Daryl Dennis will not report. Right. He will not comply. He needs a parole hearing, a revocation hearing. And that was turned down.
And it's unacceptable in your...
Oh, absolutely unacceptable. And, the question is, how many times has that happened?
Yeah. We got to take a quick commercial break. We're going to come back with more of our roundtable discussion. After this break, Senator David Sanders, Representative Reginald Murdock, I'm Roby Brock alongside David Goins. You're watching Capitol View on Sunday morning on KARK.
One of the real advantages of electric cooperatives membership is having a voice in our state's energy future.
Not a week goes by without important energy issues making headlines. These are issues that need to be discussed. And you should know that as policies are being developed, the cooperatives are looking out for our members, advocating what's best for you.
We are your friends and neighbors.
We are your local electric company.
The electric cooperatives.
We are Arkansas.
You're watching Capitol View, Sunday morning talk focused on the political scene in Arkansas.
Welcome back to Capitol View. I'm Roby Brock alongside co-host David Goins. We're joined at our political roundtable with State Senator David Sanders, Republican from Little Rock, Representative Reginald Murdock, a Democrat from Marianna. All right, gentlemen, we're talking before the break about this parole problem here, Daryl Dennis's problem. I guess the question, Representative Murdock, I'm going to come to you first with this. What happens next? What do you think happens at the legislature?
Well, I think after review and all the investigation is done, then we have to take action, because as Senator Sanders has said, this cannot happen again. There's obviously some things going on inside of our DCC and some other, maybe in the courts, and maybe in the prosecutor's office. There has to be some things going on that needs to be corrected. So after this investigation, I think it'll be time for action. I think it won't be long from now, and I think it's necessary that we do something real
Senator
soon.
Sanders, does it wait till the fiscal session?
Well, so action in this case would be administrative action potentially in terms of personnel and policy. The other aspect that we'll have to look at is, are there legislative changes that need to be made? And as Representative Murdock pointed out, do we look beyond DCC? Do we look at the courts? Do we look at all those things? And I think the answer is yes. So what exactly the changes we need, I think that's a big question. I think what's important to say is, again, what has brought this about? And I think it is sunlight being shed on internal parole documents that are currently exempt from the FOI. So nothing like a little sunshine to breathe life into a story. And it's not just a story, but it's a crisis. And we're talking about lives here, and we're talking about people. And I don't ever want to take that for granted. And we look at this as policymakers, yeah, but we also look at it as humans and fathers. And this is very tough.
Yeah, good spot there on that one. Turning to something we saw on Thursday, former State Representative Hudson Hallam out of Marion was in federal court. He did receive his sentence, which was essentially 1 year of in-home detention along with 3 years of probation for conspiracy to violate the Travel Act. That was him leaving court on Thursday, not saying a whole lot to reporters, including myself. Both Senator Sanders and Representative Murdock, your thoughts on this sentence, and really to the point of what you think this story kind of make people think when they think about public service and people getting involved in the process?
Really, what I hope comes from this is that the community and citizens will see that this is taken seriously, and that we need to make sure that as legislators, as we represent our particular areas of the state, that we honor our residents, honor the office that we serve, and that we not take no one for granted. We understand that this is serious, and the laws that apply to this are very serious. And hopefully, from this, it wasn't, the sentence. I think he got off pretty good, to be honest with you, from what I was hearing. So hopefully, Hudson himself will take this and learn from this, and that we'll all grow from this and make us just be a better state and be a better electorate for our people.
Yeah, this is a tough case because it goes to the heart of our system. It deals with elections. It deals with election fraud, and I think as citizens, as taxpayers, as representatives and senators, and as journalists, I mean, we need to at least have confidence that our elections are being run correctly. We did take some action in the legislative session dealing with election reform. I don't think that's going to go away, but this is really hard. This is really hard because it strikes at the heart of who we are, and it puts doubt in the minds of the people who elect us. And the fact of the matter is, politicians run around all the time telling people, you can trust us. And this goes, I don't think anybody should ever really trust a politician. You can trust, but you need to verify.
So, give you a reason to trust.
At least that's the way I was when I was on the other side of the table. But,
do you think voter ID would have passed during the session if Hudson Hallam wouldn't have happened? I know it's kind of putting the genie back in the bottle.
I don't know. It's hard to say. This is bigger than any one legislative issue or any bill. It did pass, and there were it was the emotions on both sides were pretty amped up.
Sure. I'll say what these guys won't say. There were 51 Republicans in the House. It was going to pass.
That's right. I forget the margin in the House.
Let's shift gears and talk about another issue that's been percolating this last week, and that is around these navigators, these healthcare guides that are going to be hired through the Arkansas Insurance Department. Senator Sanders, you've had a problem with Planned Parenthood being potentially one of those. Representative Murdock, you have defended this. What's the problem with Planned Parenthood doing this? They meet the eligibility requirements from what I've read of what the criteria is.
And if I may chime in on that first, and that's what I'm trying to honor is the process. The state has a process whereby we evaluate, we make laws in the legislative session, then it goes to the state agency directors or commissioners, head of the entities, and then they go and implement these laws. So how we procure vendors, and we were very open and honest and made sure that we opened this up in the state so that many vendors would come in for all aspects of this private option that we're trying to implement. So certainly because Planned Parenthood or whatever the organization name may be may have a political position that's not popular with a group of legislators, we should not let that preclude them from being a part of the process. I think we run the risk of legally putting us at risk if we just arbitrarily push aside an entity because it politically doesn't stand for what we stand for. Because as we know, the Insurance Department, Commissioner Bradford is going to make sure that what they go out to implement will not be abortion. It's not going to be what Planned Parenthood is about.
Last word, Senator Sanders.
Well, look, obviously Planned Parenthood is a very controversial organization, and you'd have to, kind of hide your head if you didn't believe that. And my problem with it all along is why inject controversy, needless controversy, into something that didn't need to be controversial? We're talking about the issue of abortion. You look nationwide, and while Planned Parenthood doesn't offer surgical abortion in the state of Arkansas, they do clinical abortion through the dispensing of RU486 and all those things. So from my standpoint, it was just, why are we insisting on this? Can't we all be for the greater good? Can't even Planned Parenthood sort of pull back and say, you know what, we see the prize being coverage for people who've never had it before.
But they do meet the eligibility requirements.
Yeah.
And my question is, how can we discriminate in that situation? I understand what you're saying about abortion. You're talking about abortion. We're not talking about abortion.
Yeah, I'm just talking about a very controversial organization, and again, injecting controversy where it need not be.
I just don't think we're injecting controversy. I think it's, as you say, they meet the qualifications and they should have the rights as any other organization.
All right.
That's
Gentlemen,
We'll just agree to disagree.
That's a solid panel of interaction right there. We'd like to see that. Representative Murdock, thank you very much for joining us. Senator Sanders, thank you very much as well. The private option, of course, that big legislative accomplishment of the last session, but there is a push to get rid of it We'll talk to the man behind those repeal efforts. I'm David Goins alongside Roby Brock, and you have the Capitol View on Sunday morning on KARK.